Hello, everyone. We're just getting everyone in from the waiting room. Please just be patient with us. And as that happens, I'm just going to begin with our introduction. So hello and welcome to episode 6. I'm Lindsay Randall, the host of the speaker series. Digging In is a series of live presentations with scholars from around the country, co-sponsored by the RS Peabody Institute of Archaeology and the Massachusetts Archaeological Society. We're going to begin with a land acknowledgement for the land that the Peabody Institute and its school, Phillips Academy, are on. Phillips Academy occupies the land of the Pennacook and Patuxet people and the lands of the contemporary Abenaki, Massachusetts, Wampanoag, Pokanoket, and Nipmuc nations. We honor all Indigenous peoples who are here now, have been here for time immemorial, and will be here in the future. We acknowledge Indigenous genocide and the continued oppression of Native peoples, voices, cultures, and spiritualities. And we understand how education has been used by settler institutions in the attempted erasure of Indigenous people. We commit to interrogating the histories of and our complicity in colonization, centering Native voices and communities, and dismantling the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism at Phillips Academy and beyond. So join us every other Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time through December for our presentations. For a schedule of dates and presenters, please visit us at peabody.andover.edu or at the Massachusetts Archaeological Society's Facebook page. And if you enjoy our programming, consider expanding your impact by becoming a member of the Massachusetts Archaeological Society. We're able to bring you outstanding programming through the support of viewers like you. And today we are very excited to welcome Dr. Birch. So Dr. Suzanne Birch has a joint appointment in geography and anthropology and directs the Quaternary Isotope Paleoecology Lab. And her research is focused on human adaptation and resilience in climate change and natural resource unpredictability in prehistory, and how our understanding of past human responses to environmental change informs current thinking about these issues. Dr. Birch combines archaeology and biochemistry to investigate changes in diet, mobility, and settlement systems in the period spanning the end of the last ice age to the arrival of farming. Her other research interests include the initial domestication of livestock, diffusion of domesticates across Eurasia, and the transition from hunting to herding, seasonality and human mobility, multi-species archaeology, and advancing methodologies in zooarchaeology and stable isotope analysis. She is an active advocate of open access publishing and online data and research sharing, and she co-founded and moderates the blog TrowelBlazers, which I am a huge fan of, which highlights women in the fields of archaeology, paleontology, and geology. And Dr. Birch is also an editor-in-chief of the Open Access Journal for Quaternary Science, Open Quaternary, and I can never pronounce that correctly, so my apologies. It is the one word that I cannot do. And during and at the conclusion of the talk, viewers are able to submit questions directly to me, except for my colleague Alice will be the one asking the questions at the end via the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen or in the chat function. And then we'll give Dr. Birch time to answer as many questions as she can, with the understanding we might not get to all of them. So welcome, Dr. Birch, and thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me and for that introduction. I'll just take a moment here to share my screen so that I can go through my presentation here. And of course. So thank you again for that introduction. I'm going to be talking about TrowelBlazers, which I hope that many people in the audience have heard of before, but if you haven't, then welcome, and I hope you learned something new. I wanted to start this talk by saying that, I'm giving this talk today, but TrowelBlazers is really run by 4 of us, and that's my colleagues, Dr. Brenna Hassett, Tori Herridge, and Rebecca Ragg-Sykes. And Brenna is a bioarchaeologist who specializes in human remains, particularly investigating questions about childhood and development, and uses teeth. She was previously a postdoctoral fellow at the Natural History Museum in London and is now at University College London. We're working on some research together. And I wanted to mention that she's also recently authored 2 books. Her debut was Built on Bones, and then her most recent book that just came out a few months ago is Growing Up Human. Tori is a paleobiologist who specializes in studying dwarf elephants and mammoths. And she's also hosted numerous TV shows in the UK, and currently just finished hosting an award-winning podcast on wildlife crimes produced by the Natural History Museum, where she is currently a postdoctoral fellow as well. And Becky Ragg-Sykes is also an archaeologist and author specializing in Neanderthals, and her award-winning book, Kindred, has been very popular in both the US and the UK, so perhaps you've already heard of that. She's an honorary research fellow at Liverpool after holding a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowship in France. And then myself, as Lindsay mentioned, I direct the Quaternary Isotope Paleoecology Lab at the University of Georgia. I'm an associate professor there, and I teach pretty regularly courses in zooarchaeology and global environmental change, paleoenvironmental reconstruction. So that's sort of who we are and what we do. And so if you'll notice that talking about all these things, that's sort of our main focus. And TrowelBlazers has always been sort of above and beyond that for all 4 of us. And it's really a passion project. It's been a passion project now for almost 10 years. But at the same time, because of that, right, there's always been this sort of desire to do more. And we've always really been able to kind of put our spare time into this and really love what we do with it. It's never been the focus of our main research as much as we love to spend time on it. So how did we get started? Just a little bit of an introduction. This is actually our new website, a screenshot of our new website that we launched, I guess almost a year ago now. So we had a total redesign. And this represents basically the 10 years worth of work in one place. And so back in 2013, we all met on Twitter, as one does, complaining about the lack of representation of women in archaeology, paleontology, and geology. And in particular, one of the things that we were complaining about was not that, there weren't enough women in these fields, because of course there are, but that women have been involved in the history and the development of these fields and been really integral into their development, and haven't been recognized as such. So their stories are there, but they've largely been ignored or erased. So initially we started talking as 4 basic strangers. We hadn't met in person before. And, thinking that someone should give us a TV show where we would basically travel around the world and just visit cool archaeological sites and talk about all the cool stuff that women had done. But we knew that wasn't really, who's going to give 4 postdocs their own TV show. So we decided to do the next best thing, which was start a blog, and on Tumblr, to be exact, because this was 2013, back when Tumblr was cool, before we moved to a proper website after our first successful year. So we have currently over 262 biographies on our website, but we have this very frightening spreadsheet that has almost 300 additional names on it of women to be featured. And this is a result of, basically people just sending us constantly recommendations and saying, hey, can you write about this woman? Or, hey, I heard about this woman. And it ranges from historical to modern day. People have nominated their graduate advisors, their colleagues, and so on. And so on our website, it's possible to submit someone. So you can see here, there's a little submissions tab. We love when people actually send us, something written that we can post, and even better if it has some pictures, because if it doesn't, if it's just a name, it goes on our list, our to-do list, and it's, slow going. We definitely make progress. So obviously, we have over 200 biographies, but that's, a lot of work and hours went into getting to that point. Our earliest emphasis as we built the website was on historical women, but it was never really just about that. We feature modern women too, as I said. And so some of the people that we've featured range from, for instance, Marguerite Williams, who was the first Black woman to earn a PhD in geology. And she had a really interesting backstory in terms of, when people told us about her, we went looking for a photo of her online and we couldn't find anything. We only could find this one picture, and we posted it and we ended up finding out that it was the wrong picture. It wasn't actually her. And this led us down into a journey of trying to find the right picture, working with an archive to get the correct picture posted, and remediate that error. And I bring that up because photos have always been so important to us in terms of bringing the past alive, and sharing the stories of these women. Having these really evocative photos illustrate their personal stories. We've also featured Bertha Parker. She was the first Native American woman, Abenaki and Seneca, to do archaeology in terms of our historical record, what we know. Of course, there may have been others working earlier. And we discovered her story fairly early on through this image that was posted on Flickr by the Smithsonian, and wondered, well, how can we find out more about her? And as I started doing research, I was really disappointed to find that almost every source framed all of her contributions in terms of her relationships to the men in her life, instead of focusing on her herself. And it was really the work of Marge Bruchac and Chip Colwell that I relied on really heavily to bring out her story on TrowelBlazers. And it was really important, I think, to feature her. She was one of our earlier posts, and I ended up writing a Wikipedia article about her as well that kind of tried to reframe this popular conception of her. And I was really excited one day when that was featured as kind of Wikipedia's front page, and it got thousands of hits, right? And so to bring some recognition to her and her contributions was one of our kind of really proud moments back in, I think it was 2014 or 15 that we featured her. We've also featured Hannah Marie Warmington. She was the first woman president of the Society for American Archaeology, as well as Zonia Baber, who was really a geography education pioneer. So sort of a trailblazer adjacent, if you will. We like to, these days kind of refer to ourselves as championing women in the digging sciences. So we do regularly feature women who aren't, sort of academic archaeologists or professional geologists or something like that, right? We've had journalists, we've had photographers and artists who are also related to furthering the field. And some of our modern women then have included Alice Gorman, who's a space archaeologist, Dr. Space Junk, working on, what's going on in space with all our satellites and so on. Agnes Gidna, who is a zooarchaeologist and paleoanthropologist in Tanzania, and Intisar Sagaroon El-Zain, who's the Minister for Higher Education in Sudan. She's a Sudanese archaeologist. And then one of our earlier posts on Ruth Tringham, a digital archaeologist. So we've really tried to encompass, cover a lot of ground in terms of time and geographic representation on the website, and that just continues to grow. One of the challenges has been ensuring that we are representative in our posts, because we, for the most part, work off of what people are sending us. And so we say, how can we ensure that we are featuring women that showcase the diversity of those who are participating in these fields today? So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the development of TrowelBlazers and, some of the challenges that we've faced. And I again want to underscore the fact that it has been sort of a very grassroots effort and very much a passion project. None of us had formal training at the time, although we all held PhDs in our respective disciplines. We were not really versed in archival research or public engagement or science communication or anything like that. Furthermore, there were very little resources and continue to be very few resources for a project like TrowelBlazers, where we are actively engaged, I would say, in both the academic sphere and the public-facing sphere. That said, it has worked wonderfully, and that's in part because I think of the enthusiasm of our larger community. So a couple of years ago, we gained nonprofit status and sort of, became a little bit more formally organized in terms of that structure, right? And realized that, hey, we're not really just a blog anymore. We're not just a website anymore. All of our different activities have really pushed us into something larger. And we've just had so much support from institutions who, we contact archives. Can you help us find a photo of this woman? Yes, this has never been published before. Let's do it and sort of bring her face to light, literally. Hosting different events for us. Obviously, the majority of our posts on our site are now guest submissions. They're not by us anymore, for years, haven't been. Although we still are very active in terms of the editing and formatting and tracking down the images and image permissions. Likewise, the four of us as a group have become extremely tight-knit, and we're probably each other's strongest support network. And networks is something that we've become all about as we progressed. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we went from never having met in person before to being able to kind of assemble bits and pieces. So I have a picture of Brenna, Tori, and Becky getting together early on, and then Tori and I on fieldwork in Malta. And then finally, in 2017, when we launched our Raising Horizons photo exhibition at the Geological Society in London, that was the first time that the four of us were all together at the same time. So 4 years after we formed TrowelBlazers. So as time has gone by, we've really evolved and grown our audience. We're now at over 15,000 followers on Twitter, where we were, born. So it's not really a surprise that that's our largest component. But we also have a large audience on Facebook, and it does tend to be a different kind of audience. Obviously, the posts are different format and so on. We still maintain our Tumblr. It still exists. We don't update it, I should say. Instagram is our probably, our least engagement in terms of where we're posting and sort of growing. And then we recently started a TikTok just for fun, just to kind of stay cool. But I think we've only posted 1 or 2 videos, or maybe shared one. So that's kind of, low on the list. But I did want to share this screenshot from our analytics, and this is from the year up to October 2016, after we started our website. And you can see the representation, is relatively patchy. And our main visitor engagement, people coming to our website to read the posts, was always the US, UK, Canada, and Western Europe, even though we might have had a couple of hits from elsewhere. That's really changed in the last couple of years. So this is an updated map that I just pulled a couple of days ago, and our geographic reach has really expanded. And interestingly, we are now seeing the US is still #1, but our top 10 has shifted from including, the UK and Canada and Western Europe to now including countries in South America, East Asia, and Africa. And the UK has actually slipped to our #10 in terms of visitorship. And so I think that's actually something that really shows how our efforts to ensure global coverage and diversifying our posts and posting bilingual posts has really helped to broaden our reach, which is, of course, what we're sort of all about. So I talked a little bit about networks, and I included networks in the title of this talk. And that was really initiated by the early days of our founding the site. We wanted to post about Dorothy Garrett because we all knew about her as a beacon in archaeology. But what none of us realized was that she was running excavations in the 20s with all female crews, and in particular, engaging with local women in the community as well. That resulted in this network graph that's been around now for several years that Tori created, where we had, really great success in making lots of different connections and reconstructing this late 20th, or rather early 20th century social network diagram. However, we realized that even as we were exposing these stories of women that were lesser known, these women themselves were also privileged, educated women. And how could we expand those networks and tell other stories? And so that's really been the focus of our website and our research the last couple of years. We recently put together a chapter and we're doing some research, and we revisited, Bertha Parker and her archive, and found some nice photographs of her with her aunt, Edna Harrington, who was married to Mark Harrington, who was an archaeologist. And again, you see Edna referenced as, oh, she helped him out on excavations. And so that kind of made us wonder, well, how involved was she really? And again, how many times do we see over and over and over again in our research over the last 10 years, this way of referring to women, whether they're married or other colleagues, their sort of role in discovery being downplayed. Another recent contribution to our website through student work was looking at the development of excavations at the Irene Mound in Georgia. The WPA funded and sponsored excavations in the late 30s and early 40s. And these were excavations that were primarily run, or primarily fueled, I should say, by the labor of African-American women who worked for the WPA. There were also white women involved in these projects, and then there were 4 men who led the project. And so when you look at, take a kind of a first glance, it's these men who are leading the project that were sort of being acknowledged, and the labor of all of these women, particularly African-American women, were totally erased. And there's been some, there's certainly been some literature about this. We don't claim that we're, discovering things that nobody else has ever said before, but rather we're trying to take some of that research and heighten it and bring it to a wider audience. So for example, I first learned about the Irene Mound reading work by Cheryl Klassen from the 1990s. And, one of the things that really struck us was that a lot of these women, their names were not even kept on record. And so there's barely any way to acknowledge them, but we were able to find some photographs and put them up on our website in our recent post. We've also just authored a chapter looking again at some of these networks that have been lesser explored. And so we're again engaged pretty actively in trying to broaden people's recognition that, it's not just about the single woman or an educated woman from a privileged background, but rather that there are women around the world throughout time that have been contributing and have been working together to further these disciplines. So I think I'll end there in the interest of time, and because I'd love to also hear from the audience and have some discussion.
All right, anybody who would like to submit a question in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask the doctor some questions if you have anything you'd like to know about her research. So we do have a question that is, what is your favorite story that you've uncovered so far?
Well, I'd have to say that Bertha Parker is one of my favorites, just because I was able to spend the time at the time a few years ago to really dig in and, read all about her contributions and actually look at some of the primary sources. I mean, she actually published quite a bit in a regional journal. And so she kind of holds a special place for me as one of the first women that I was able to kind of engage with and really felt like, wow, I never knew about her before. Why haven't I heard about her? But I'd also say a perennial favorite of ours also, I think as a group, is this one of Dorothy Garrett and her teams that included both British and American women back in the 20s. So that's sort of a, yeah, two answers.
I think that's a great point that you raise, and it leads us to our next question too, is there's a lot of women that you think, why haven't we heard of this before? This is an amazing thing. And so I think because of that, it's great you focus on kind of women's stories, but have you received any pushback or backlash for only focusing on women?
No, I mean, we are certainly, when we started, we were 4 young women working in, as postdocs, and we were feeling very isolated, I think, at the time. And these were stories that brought us some, made us feel supported, knowing, oh, there have been women doing this for far longer and in far greater numbers than any of us realize. And I think that, we're not set up to be exclusionary in any kind of way. And so we haven't had anyone, who's sort of taken issue with that focus.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit more about the fossil hunter Lottie doll you mentioned to develop that doll? That seems like a great thing.
Yeah, and that was very early on. The company contacted us. I guess that was probably in the first few months of us starting. And so we were, getting lots of attention at that time, way more than we had planned on. We just thought, okay, we're going to start this thing and it's going to be, of interest to us. And we didn't expect to have the reaction that we did. But yeah, so the company contacted us, and their whole, spiel as a company is to create dolls that are body positive. And so the dolls are actually ratio appropriate, except for the head is slightly larger than it would be in real life, to allow for, hair play. But they contacted us and said, we have this realistic body of a 9-year-old girl, basically is what the doll is based on. And this is to kind of combat all the negative stereotypes around Barbie dolls and so on. And could you help us envision, what that would look like? And so they already kind of had the idea for Fossil Hunter Lottie, but they didn't have, for instance, we recommended like cargo shorts and a baseball hat as more realistic than like a floppy fedora type thing, and a backpack instead of a side bag. And her, excavation tools and things like that. So we consulted on the design of the doll and then the packaging, as well as the informational content. So there's educational content in there with the doll.
That's definitely something we see a lot of in the society too, is that people have maybe this preconceived notion based predominantly off of film of what archaeologists look like and what they wear. And so it's funny that you mentioned more specific feedback into the clothes. Does anybody else have any questions? Polly, I see that you're raising your hand. Are you still on the call, Polly Stevens? Okay. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to raise their hand or type into the chat? All right. Well, I want to say thank you so much to our speaker today. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next Zoom lecture on Wednesday, October 26th, when we're joined by Annie Danis, who will be speaking about the practices of home and homeless encampments. And again, we rely on the support of viewers just like you all. So please consider supporting our outreach by becoming a member of the Massachusetts Archaeological Society. You all have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.